Ancient Greece is often called the cradle of Western civilization. During antiquity, the Greek-speaking peoples developed ideas and institutions in politics, philosophy, art, and science that became foundational for Western culture. From the rise of the earliest Greek civilizations in the Bronze Age to the Golden Age of city-states like Athens, and through the era of Alexander the Great, the history of Greece spans many centuries. In this journey, we will explore how Greek civilization evolved over time and how it influenced the broader course of human civilization, from the advent of democracy and logical thought to groundbreaking achievements in literature, mathematics, and more. Early Bronze Age civilizations, Minoans and Mycenaeans. Long before the rise of the classical Greek city-states, advanced societies emerged in the Aegean during the Bronze Age. On the island of Crete, the Minoan civilization flourished circa 2000 to 1450 BC and is often regarded as the first civilization in Europe. The Minoans built elaborate palace complexes, such as the famous palace at Knossos, adorned with vibrant frescoes and art. They developed a writing system, Linear A, that remains undeciphered, and their influence spread across the Aegean through extensive maritime trade. The legendary King Minos of Crete, famous from the Greek myth of Theseus and the Minotaur in the Labyrinth, gives his name to the Minoan civilization, a term coined by archaeologist Sir Arthur Evans in the 20th century. Centuries of prosperity on Crete eventually waned, and after around 1450 BC, Crete came under the sway of mainland Greeks, the Mycenaeans. By about 1100 BC, the Minoan era had come to an end. Following the Minoans, the Mycenaean civilization circa 1600 to 1100 BC dominated mainland Greece. The Mycenaeans were the first distinctively Greek culture, speaking an early form of the Greek language and building their own palatial city-states. Kingdoms like Mycenae, from which the culture gets its name. Pylos, Thebes, and Athens were centers of Mycenaean power. They left behind massive fortified palace complexes, such as the Lion Gate of Mycenae, and clay tablets in Linear B script, the earliest written records of the Greek language. This era of heroes and warfare provided the backdrop for later legends such as the Trojan War. In Greek tradition, the Mycenaean king Agamemnon led a coalition to besiege Troy, a story immortalized centuries later in Homer's epic poems, the Iliad and Odyssey. Around 1200 BC, the Mycenaean world collapsed as many of its cities were destroyed or abandoned. Scholars have debated causes for this late Bronze Age collapse, among them the semi-legendary Dorian invasion, or raiders known as the Sea Peoples, as well as internal strife or natural disasters. With the fall of the Mycenaeans, Greece entered a period of decline. The Greek Dark Ages circa 1100 to 800 BC. The fall of the Mycenaean kingdoms was followed by a Dark Age in Greece. Between roughly 1100 BC and 800 BC, population declined and many settlements shrank or were abandoned. The high culture of palaces and writing vanished. The Mycenaean Linear B script was lost and no new writing system appeared for centuries. Without written records, details of this era are murky. Later Greeks believed that a new wave of Greek-speaking peoples, the Dorians, invaded during this time, contributing to Mycenae's fall and settling especially in the southern regions. Whether through migration or gradual change, by the end of the Dark Age, new dialects and tribal groupings, Ionian, Dorian, Aeolian, had formed among the Greek people. It appears to have been a time of simpler, small-scale village life and reduced trade. Iron gradually replaced bronze for tools and weapons during this era, marking the start of the Iron Age. Oral tradition kept memories of earlier times alive. It was likely towards the end of this Dark Age, 8th century BC, that Homer's epic poems, the Iliad and Odyssey, were first composed, preserving legends of the Mycenaean age. By around 800 BC, Greece began to recover, setting the stage for a new chapter of growth in the Archaic period. The Archaic period circa 800 to 500 BC. By 800 BC, Greek civilization was reviving. The next few centuries, known as the Archaic period, saw a resurgence in population and the birth of the Greek city-state, the polis. New villages coalesced into towns and cities, and the Greeks began to venture abroad, establishing colonies across the Mediterranean and Black Sea shores. From Spain and North Africa to Asia Minor and the Black Sea, these new Greek settlements spread Hellenic culture far and wide, linked by sea trade and a common language and religion. By the end of the Archaic Age, the Greeks were part of a trade network spanning the entire Mediterranean world. During this era, the Greeks also began using coined money, first adopted in the 6th century BC, which facilitated commerce and economic interaction between cities. Culturally, the Archaic period laid the groundwork for Greece's classical achievements. Around the 8th century BC, the Greeks adapted the Phoenician alphabet, reintroducing writing to Greece. This enabled the preservation of literature. Tradition holds that it was in this period that Homer's Iliad and Odyssey were finally set down in writing from earlier oral poetry. Art and architecture flourished as well. The Greeks began building stone temples and creating life-size sculptures. They developed distinctive styles of pottery decoration, the geometric style, then later the black figure and red figure techniques, to depict myths, daily life, and legendary heroes. In warfare, the hoplite citizen soldier armed with spear and shield became central. Hoplites fought in close formation, the phalanx, reflecting the communal ethos of the polis and giving Greek armies a strong sense of unity. The first Olympic Games were traditionally held in 776 BC at Olympia, marking a cultural milestone that fostered a shared Greek identity through sport and religion. Likewise, all Greeks worshipped the same pantheon of gods, such as Zeus, Hera, Athena, Apollo. Major sanctuaries like the Oracle of Delphi, where people from all over Greece came to seek Apollo's prophecies, became common religious and cultural meeting points for the otherwise independent city-states. Politically, this era saw experimentation with different forms of governance in the various city-states. Many cities were initially ruled by kings or landowning aristocracies, but by the 7th and 6th centuries BC, various tyrants, strongman rulers, had seized power in several polis, often with popular support, to challenge the noble families. Lawgivers such as Draco and Solon in Athens instituted written laws and reforms, curbing abuses and laying the foundation for more inclusive government. In Athens, Solon's reforms in 594 BC and later those of Cleisthenes in 508 BC created new institutions, such as the citizen assembly and council, that would develop into the world's first democracy. Meanwhile, Sparta developed along a very different path. After conquering the neighboring region of Messenia and enslaving its population, the Helots, Sparta became a militarized oligarchy. Many of the institutions later credited to the lawgiver Lycurgus, such as Sparta's dual kingship, elders' council, and barracks education, likely took shape during the Archaic period. By the end of the Archaic era, Sparta had formed the Peloponnesian League and was recognized as a leading military power in Greece. Spartan society was famously austere and militaristic. Male citizens underwent strict training from childhood, the agoge, and lived in communal barracks, while Spartan women, though not politically enfranchised, had greater freedom and a role in managing estates when men were at war. This sharply contrasted with the more refined, art-loving society of Athens, where public affairs were dominated by men and elite women lived in relative seclusion. The late Archaic period also witnessed the dawn of Greek philosophy and science. Thinkers in Ionia, such as Thales of Miletus circa 6th century BC, sought natural explanations for the world, proposing that a fundamental substance, like water, underlies all things. Others, like Pythagoras of Samos, late 6th century BC, explored numerical relationships and taught that numbers and abstract principles govern reality. This spirit of rational inquiry was something new, a move away from purely mythological explanations, and would blossom further in the classical era. By 500 BC, the Greek world was intellectually and politically primed for the dramatic developments of the classical period, though it would first face a great external test: the Persian Wars. The classical period circa 500 to 323 BC. The dawn of the 5th century BC brought a new threat and a defining moment for the Greeks: the Persian Wars. The vast Persian Empire had absorbed the Greek cities of Ionia in modern Turkey, prompting an uprising, the Ionian Revolt, in 499 BC. In response, King Darius I of Persia attempted to subjugate mainland Greece. The Athenians famously defeated Darius's forces at the Battle of Marathon in 490 BC against the odds. According to later legend, an Athenian messenger ran roughly 26 miles from Marathon to Athens to announce the victory, inspiring the modern marathon race. A decade later, Darius's son Xerxes launched an even larger invasion. In 480 BC, a small Spartan-led Greek force under King Leonidas made a heroic stand at Thermopylae while the Persian army marched south. Athens was evacuated and then burned by the Persians, but Greek resistance continued. Late in 480 BC, the Athenian navy won a decisive victory at Salamis, and the next year, 479 BC, a coalition of Greek city-states defeated the Persians at Plataea. These victories ended the Persian invasions. The Greeks, though outmatched in numbers, had preserved their independence and gained immense confidence. The Acropolis of Athens, crowned by the Parthenon Temple, was rebuilt in the 5th century BC under Pericles, a lasting symbol of the golden age of Athens. With the Persian threat gone, Athens rose to a position of leadership among the Greek city-states. It formed the Delian League, an alliance originally created to continue the fight against Persia, which evolved into an Athenian-led empire and entered a period of great prosperity. The mid-5th century BC is often called the Golden Age of Athens or the Age of Pericles, after the statesman who led Athens at its height. During this time, democracy in Athens matured. Ordinary male citizens could speak and vote in the assembly, serve on juries, and hold public office by lot. Athens became the preeminent cultural center of Greece, using its wealth and influence to build magnificent temples, like the Parthenon atop the Acropolis, and to sponsor the arts and sciences. The first great plays of Western literature were written and performed in Athens. The tragic dramas of Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides, and the sharp comedies of Aristophanes. In philosophy, Athens was home to thinkers who profoundly shaped Western thought. Socrates taught the value of questioning assumptions, the Socratic method, in the pursuit of truth and virtue. His student Plato founded the academy and wrote philosophical dialogues examining justice, truth, and the ideal state. Plato's student Aristotle, in turn, founded the Lyceum and wrote on virtually every field of knowledge, from biology and physics to ethics, politics, and logic. Indeed, much of the defining intellectual and artistic heritage of Western civilization, in drama, history writing, architecture, and philosophy, traces back to classical Athens' heyday. However, Athens' golden age was short-lived. The city's growing power and rivalry with Sparta, which led its own Peloponnesian alliance, eventually escalated into the Peloponnesian War, 431 to 404 BC. This decades-long conflict pitted the Athenian-led Delian League against Sparta's Peloponnesian League, and it engulfed the entire Greek world. The war brought great suffering. A plague devastated Athens early in the war, 430 BC, killing Pericles and a quarter of the city's population, and intermittent fighting dragged on for a generation. In 404 BC, Sparta, with Persian financial support for its navy, finally forced Athens to surrender, ending the war. The victorious Spartans imposed an oligarchy in Athens, the 30 Tyrants. But it was short-lived, and Athenian democracy was restored within a year. The war left the Greek city-states exhausted and divided. Sparta tried to assert dominance over Greece but soon faced challenges. In 371 BC, Thebes defeated Sparta at the Battle of Leuctra, ending Spartan supremacy. For a brief period, Thebes under Epaminondas was the leading power, but continual strife among the city-states prevented any lasting unity or peace. In the midst of this turmoil, a new power from the north rose to prominence. Macedon, Macedonia. King Philip II of Macedon reigned 359 to 336 BC, took advantage of the Greek city's weakness. A shrewd military reformer, Philip created a professional army, introducing the longer pike, or sarissa, in his phalanx, and systematically conquered or subdued the fragmented Greek city-states. In 338 BC, Philip won a decisive victory over an alliance of Athens and Thebes at the Battle of Chaeronea, effectively bringing most of Greece under Macedonian control. Philip's assassination in 336 BC put his 20-year-old son Alexander on the throne. Over the next decade, Alexander the Great would unleash one of history's most extraordinary military campaigns, carrying Greek arms and influence all the way to Egypt and deep into Asia. By 330 BC, Alexander had overthrown the mighty Persian Empire and marched as far east as the Indus Valley. His empire stretched from Greece and Egypt to the frontiers of India. Alexander's conquests spread Greek, Hellenic culture far and wide, initiating a new era of cultural fusion. When Alexander died suddenly in 323 BC, the classical period of independent Greek city-states effectively came to an end. In its wake, the stage was set for the Hellenistic Age, during which Greek influence would persist under new dynasties and far-flung lands. The Hellenistic period, 323 to 30 BC. Alexander's untimely death in 323 BC left his vast empire without a clear heir. His top generals, known as the Diadochi, soon fought among themselves and carved up the empire into several Hellenistic kingdoms. Key realms included the Ptolemaic kingdom in Egypt, founded by Ptolemy, one of Alexander's generals, the Seleucid Empire in Mesopotamia and the Near East, and the Antigonid kingdom in Macedonia and Greece. Although politically divided, these states shared a common Greek-inspired culture. Greek settlers, officials, and mercenaries spread out to new cities, many founded by Alexander or his successors, from Egypt to Central Asia. A common dialect of Greek, Koine Greek, became the lingua franca across these lands, and Greek art, education, and theater blended with local traditions. The city of Alexandria in Egypt, in particular, became a renowned center of learning and culture, home to the great library and scholars from all over the Mediterranean. The Hellenistic era was one of cultural vitality and exchange. Philosophers like Zeno of Citium founded Stoicism, teaching virtue, self-control, and resilience, while Epicurus in Athens advocated the pursuit of tranquility and happiness, Epicureanism. Advances in science and technology reached new heights. In geometry and mathematics, Euclid compiled his Elements in Alexandria, laying the foundations of systematic geometry. Archimedes of Syracuse made brilliant discoveries in physics and engineering, from explaining the principle of buoyancy to inventing ingenious mechanical devices. Astronomers like Aristarchus of Samos proposed that the Earth revolves around the Sun, a heliocentric idea remarkably ahead of its time. And Eratosthenes measured the Earth's circumference with surprising accuracy. Hellenistic art took on new realism and emotional depth, as seen in sculptural masterpieces like the Winged Victory of Samothrace and the Dying Gaul. In literature, this period produced works like the Argonautica of Apollonius and a rich collection of poetry and scholarship at the Library of Alexandria. Hellenistic architects and engineers also achieved marvels. They constructed massive projects such as the 100-meter lighthouse of Alexandria, Pharos, and the colossal statue of Helios at Rhodes, the Colossus of Rhodes, later counted among the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Political power in the Hellenistic world eventually waned in the face of a rising force from the west, Rome. Macedonia and mainland Greece fell under Roman domination by the mid-2nd century BC. After Rome defeated the Macedonian kingdom and destroyed the city of Corinth in 146 BC. In 31 BC, the forces of Rome, under Octavian, the future Augustus, defeated Mark Antony and the last Hellenistic ruler, Queen Cleopatra VII of Egypt, a descendant of the Ptolemies, at the Battle of Actium. The following year, in 30 BC, Egypt was annexed by Rome. These events mark the conventional end of the Hellenistic period. However, Greek culture itself was far from ended. It continued to flourish under Roman rule. The Romans deeply admired Greek art, architecture, and ideas, and they adopted much of the Greek cultural legacy as their own. Educated Romans spoke Greek as well as Latin, and cities like Athens and Alexandria remained important centers of learning in the Roman world. In this sense, the legacy of ancient Greece lived on even as political sovereignty passed to Rome. Legacy of ancient Greece. Raphael's famous Renaissance fresco, The School of Athens, 1509, depicts ancient Greek philosophers Plato, left center, and Aristotle, right center, a testament to the enduring influence of Greek thought on Western culture. The achievements of ancient Greece have had a profound and lasting impact on subsequent civilizations. As the Roman orator Cicero once noted, "Not to know what happened before one was born is to remain forever a child." And much of that ancient past which informs the modern world is rooted in Greece. Here are some of the key legacies of the Greek world. Government and democracy. The Greeks pioneered the idea of rule by the people. Classical Athens introduced direct democracy, citizens debating and voting on laws, a radical departure from the monarchies and empires elsewhere in the ancient world. Concepts such as constitutional government, citizens' rights to free speech, elections, trial by jury, civic discourse and debate, civilian control of the military, and the separation of religion and state all have roots in ancient Greek practices. The very word democracy is Greek, from demos, the people, and kratos, power. Many principles of modern republican governance, from voting procedures to civic discussion, were first tested in the city-states of Greece. Philosophy and ethical thought. Ancient Greek philosophers laid the foundation for Western philosophy and science. From the ethical inquiries of Socrates and Aristotle to Plato's examinations of justice and reality, Greek thinkers asked fundamental questions about knowledge, existence, and the good life. The Greek tradition of rational inquiry, using reason and dialogue to understand the world, is a cornerstone of Western intellectual history. Schools of thought founded by Greeks, Platonism, Aristotelian logic, Stoicism, Epicureanism, and others, directly shaped later philosophy and even religious thought. Texts like Plato's Republic or Aristotle's works on logic and politics are still read today, and concepts they introduced, such as Platonic ideals or Aristotelian logic, remain part of our philosophical vocabulary. Science and mathematics. Greeks of the classical and Hellenistic eras made groundbreaking advances in science and math, establishing many disciplines still in use. They developed geometry into an axiomatic system. Euclid's Elements organized mathematical principles that students learn even now, and laid early foundations of algebra and number theory. Greek scientists sought natural laws. Aristotle studied biology and physics systematically. Archimedes discovered principles of engineering and hydrostatics, and Hipparchus and Ptolemy mapped the stars and planets. Greek doctors like Hippocrates looked for natural causes of illness and set ethical standards for medicine. The Hippocratic Oath for physicians originates from his school. In short, the Greeks set the early framework for fields such as medicine, biology, zoology, physics, and mathematics, including geometry and trigonometry. They introduced the approach of explaining phenomena through reasoned observation and logic, essentially the first steps toward the scientific method. Literature and drama. The Greeks were the first to create what we recognize as Western literature. Homer's epic poems, the Iliad and the Odyssey, became foundational texts, inspiring countless later works and defining epic storytelling. Greek playwrights invented theater as an art form, creating both tragedy and comedy. The powerful tragic dramas of Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides, and the satirical comedies of Aristophanes were performed for mass audiences and are still read and staged 2,500 years later. Greek lyric poetry, exemplified by the poet Sappho of Lesbos circa 6th century BC, introduced personal themes and passionate expression into verse, a tradition that influenced later Western poetry. The practice of writing history was also a Greek innovation. Herodotus and Thucydides penned the earliest works of history in a critical, investigative style, earning Herodotus the title Father of History. Thus, everything from modern novels and plays to the writing of history itself owes a debt to the literary innovations of ancient Greece. Art and architecture. Greek aesthetic ideals of harmony, proportion, and balance have guided art and architecture in Western civilization for millennia. Classical Greek sculpture introduced lifelike realism and celebrated the human form, establishing standards of beauty that influenced the art of later eras, notably the Renaissance. Greek architects developed three orders of architecture: Doric, Ionic, Corinthian, and built enduring structures like the Parthenon that epitomize elegance and symmetry. These designs heavily influenced Roman architecture and, through the Renaissance and neoclassical eras, inspired countless government buildings, museums, and monuments around the world. In sculpture and painting, Renaissance artists like Michelangelo explicitly looked back to Greek models for inspiration, reviving classical poses and ideals. The very concept of representing ideals such as democracy or justice with allegorical statues, a common practice in modern capitals, harks back to Greek artistic traditions. Sports and the Olympic tradition. The Greeks originated the Olympic Games, first recorded in 776 BC, as a pan-Hellenic festival of athletics in honor of Zeus. The idea of using sports competitions to bring together different peoples in peaceful rivalry is a Greek legacy. Today's International Olympic Games, revived in 1896, consciously emulate the ancient tradition. Even events like the discus and javelin throw derive from ancient Greek contests. The very concept of organized sports with standardized rules and the ideal of sportsmanship trace back to the Greek gymnasiums and arenas. Greek athletic ideals celebrated physical fitness, competitive spirit, and honor for victors, values that continue to be central in sports worldwide. In summary, the history of ancient Greece left an indelible mark on human civilization. The political ideas of citizen governance, the philosophical pursuit of wisdom, the scientific and mathematical principles, and the artistic and literary masterpieces of the Greeks became the bedrock of Western culture. Long after the decline of Greek political power, the world continued to build upon Greek ideas. Whether in the Roman Empire, the European Renaissance, or the modern era. From our systems of government and modes of thought to our literature, art, and even sports, we continue to feel the enduring echo of ancient Greece in our daily lives.